Pro Football Focus and the New Orleans Saints draft grade. Okay, so we already know, spoiler alert, we already know that the Saints were one of 4 teams in the NFL that PFF, Pro Football Focus, gave an A+. All right, so I'm expecting in this video, these 2 young gentlemen are going to explain why the Saints were one of the 4 teams to get an A+, and some of their metrics and analytics and whatever they use to come up with the grading system. So I'm excited to see this because we have done videos on obviously the draft and the draft grades and all of that, and we've defended the picks. But to hear PFF tell us, show us a peek behind the curtain and show us exactly how they come up with their grades, can't wait to watch this. Take it away.
New Orleans Saints, where were they on the composite? Let me pull this out here. I should have laminated this. It would have been better.
Really
Number 15 on the composite, but an A+ per PFF. The New Orleans Saints, 2 first-round caliber players with their first 2 picks. I think that's why we did really like this. And this is where they just get the grades are lower because they didn't have 3rd and 4th round picks.
Yeah. So 100%. So the reason that the grade is so high is because of the top end. Fuaga and McKinstry, when you can come out of a draft and you have the 14th pick and the 41st pick, and you come out of that and you look at it and say, these are 2 consensus graded first round picks. That is such a win. To get a first round graded player in the 2nd round, unbelievable. That's why I said for 3 or 4 months, guys, we got to quit drafting for need. We got to watch the board and we got to say, wow, if this amazingly talented player falls, we have to be ready to scoop them up regardless of what position they play. It just so happens that Kool-Aid McKinstry plays a position that we did kind of need. It wasn't a huge need, but you always need players in the secondary, right? It's a little different as if we would have taken a running back or something. So, coming out of that, 10 out of 10. Then you do skip a bunch. I was surprised. Now, I do have to wonder if they didn't move into the 3rd or 4th because they used some capital to move up to take Kool-Aid. So I wonder if they wouldn't have done that if they would have moved up into the 3rd or the 4th. So that's a question mark. Because there is that gap, it obviously is going to hurt your total caliber of players. When you don't have 3rd rounders, when you don't have 4th rounders, it's going to hurt your overall. And then Rattler. Now, Rattler's this is the big question mark. Because on one hand, pure value, unbelievable amount of value. You could argue it's somewhere around 100 picks of value. You could argue it's somewhere in that neighborhood. I saw a tweet today where a draft analyst had Rattler as their number 1 graded quarterback in the class. And that's just physicals, which is nuts, okay? 7th quarterback taken, 6 quarterbacks taken in the top 12. Is he really 138 picks worse? Quick math there than Bo Nix? No, probably not, right? So just staring at it, crazy amount of value. Now, if we're going to really give this an A+, you probably have to get something out of Rattler. If we're going to look back at this in 2027, if we're going to look back at this in 2028 and say, what do we think about the 2024 draft? Is it one of the best draft classes of all time? If we have a Pro Bowl level starting quarterback in Spencer Rattler, it probably is one of the best drafts. It probably is one of the best Saints drafts of all time, right? If Rattler is a backup and that's about it and nothing really comes of it, changes things, right? This pick is the big turning point because for what PFF's doing, as far as like the A+ thing with the draft day grade, I totally understand why the Spencer Rattler pick is big because of the value. He's not a 5th round pick. He's not the 150th pick. Consensus, minimum, 3rd round. Right, so just that is value. But for us, for Saints fans, now that the draft was a week away. Okay, these grades are cool, but now we're moving into okay. Now we need to see impact. Now we need to see actual results. And Rattler obviously we will not know for a couple of years.
Like if you just grade them off what they drafted, these first 3 picks, could they get any better?
You really think that's how people are great when they give them like C's? You think that's what's happening? They're like,
yes.
No 3rd and 4th. I can't give this more than a
No,
C.
it happens subconsciously. I'll tell you in a second. Taliese Fuaga, the first rounder out of the tackle out of Oregon State. Kool-Aid McKinstry, the 2nd round cornerback out of Alabama. Didn't have another pick until the 5th round. They get QB Spencer Rattler. out of South Carolina. They got your guy Bub Means, the wide receiver out of Pittsburgh. Jalen Ford, the linebacker out of Texas. Christian Boyd, defensive tackle or edge/D tackle.
The Saints had 2 drafts, I think. Like, they had their first 3 picks, which were best player available, arguably the best player available, and sort of kind of a position of need looking towards the future. These 3 picks are very different than the other picks, right? Like, these 3 picks are Taliese Fuaga, tried and true, Oregon State, Power 5, played every game, didn't give up a sack, Kool-Aid McKinstry, Alabama, huge pedigree, all of that. Again, grade, first round grade. Spencer Rattler, huge name, a lot of talent. We all know, what happened from Oklahoma and South Carolina. And then it changed. Then the Saints said, okay, now let's get back into that diamond in the rough type situation. Bub Means, I think he's only played wide receiver for like a year. I feel like I read that. Someone double check me. I'm pretty sure he made other positions, and then he's only been like a full-time wide receiver for 1 year. So big-time straight line speed, developmental, relatively raw. Jalen Ford kind of bounces back to the top ones, where Jalen Ford is he was the guy. He was the green dot. He was the captain. He was the middle linebacker. The linebacker for a college football playoff team, a huge national power. So you can look at him as like a tried and true player, less of a developmental player, but that comes with the caveat that Dennis Allen said he's going to be a special teamer who maybe will end up playing linebacker. And then, of course, Boyd and Zerum, developmental. So this is small. This is falling back on what they've done in the past, where Northern Iowa, Eastern Kentucky, can we develop these guys? They're 2 years away from being a year away type situation. So we got a little bit of everything. We got a little bit of, relatively small amount of development needed, relatively small amount of lead-in time needed, and then we got a bunch of the developmental picks there.
Out of Northern Iowa. So I thought it was a pretty good draft by the Saints. What happens is people just look at the talent brought in.
But they're good talent.
No, I know that. But
people thought Rattler would go in the 3rd round. So to get him in the 5th, they wouldn't even notice the difference. It's just, they got Rattler, 3rd round, perfect.
I think more people should have the Saints in the top 5 or 6 then, based off
Agreed.
The evaluation of those players, where they got them. I mean, we thought Rattler could go as high as 2 because 2nd round, because you don't know how teams
quarterbacks get overvalued.
Quarterbacks and when they want to get them. And
Did you see the analysis surrounding the reason for his fall?
So if you look at the PFF big board, okay, Rattler's our 77th best player. We got him at 150. So if you just go by their board, you're talking about 80 picks of value. And that's crazy. So that's over 2 rounds of value in this guy. Whether he is really good, or whether when he plays, or if he plays, or however it plays out, but just draft day. Like, that is a nuts amount of value
that people posited.
Yeah, I mean, I saw people push back against it, but yeah, go ahead.
What was the pushback against? So the suggestion was that how Rattler came across on this Netflix reality show that he was a part of in high school was
QB1.
bad, and therefore teams were like, "Oh, I can't have that. Can't have that kind of attitude. Get out of here."
Yeah, and then some of that may have carried over to Oklahoma. But then every report coming out of South Carolina and the way he's acted and handled things the last few years was positive. That was the pushback.
Hugely positive out of South Carolina. It ends at Oklahoma. All the negativity, all the immaturity, all that ends when Caleb Williams takes the job. From when Caleb Williams takes the job in Oklahoma to when Rattler is drafted by the Saints, there's no negativity. There's nothing problematic. All the problematic stuff is high school, getting recruited, and 7 games at Oklahoma. That's it. So when you look at it like that, Rattler's had way more positive time, like actual length of time, way more positive length of time than he has negative.
Back was like, this That was 4 years ago, whatever it was, right?
But that doesn't necessarily mean that's not. I mean, NFL teams don't always act rationally just because he's. It's entirely plausible that seeing that put off NFL teams, even if he has subsequently matured and become a different player, different person.
I'm torn on those two things, right? I'm empathetic to the player. Imagine if someone judged you off something you did or said or acted when you were 17, whether the camera was on or not. That would be horrible, and you would say
ridiculous. Yeah.
The difference in me at 17 versus 20 versus 22, 23 was astronomically different. Right. On the other hand, I mean, I was around when I was coaching at Elite 11. I was around Josh Rosen, right? And he was kind of immature at that age, right? Because of his circumstances, right? Because of how he was, whatever circumstances he was put in. Maybe he didn't come across great toward the coaches, and that may have, not changed throughout his career. I don't know.
Right.
At the same time, there were some coaches who couldn't stand. I can be honest about this. 8 years later,
probably
there were some coaches who couldn't stand Christian Kirk.
Yeah.
As one of the receivers there at it was called the Opening at the time, and he's turned out to be pretty good. They're like, oh no, this guy's never going to make it. Like, okay, you were wrong. So
I think the draft is so hard, just from a football standpoint. It's so hard to know how a player's game is going to translate, how a player is going to gel with a locker room, with a scheme, with a playbook, what kind of work they're going to put in, stuff like that. To try and also grade or predict or project how someone's going to mature, how someone's going to handle millions of dollars, how they're going to handle 50, 60, 70, 80,000 people in a stadium around them, how they're going to handle living in whatever city they get drafted to, how they're going to handle any of that stuff. Like, to try and judge that part is impossible. I would throw all of that out unless it was like a huge red flag. Huge red flag. Obviously, if somebody has like legit character issues, has legit personality problems, whatever it may be, okay, factor it in. But if a 17, 18-year-old is immature, or they're reckless or anything like that, like any of the attributes you would assume a 17, 18, 19-year-old is going to be, you just got to kind of cross your fingers and hope that you can get them right. Same when you see people like Laramie Tunsil. Like, he drops in the draft because it comes out that he is smoking, is caught on video smoking a banned substance. Like, is that a one-time thing? Is that something that he did in college or whenever the video was filmed, and then you're hoping that when he gets to the pros and he has to buckle down and he's willing to do that? Like, I'll take that chance. This is a wild comparison, but me and my friends used to play Edward 40 hands with Mad Dog 2020. If y'all don't know what that is, we used to take Mad Dog 2020 bottles, which is like malt liquor, and we used to duct tape it to your hands. Like, you'd have a 40 on each hand duct taped. I mean, this is, again, this is not the greatest. And the only way you could get them off your hands is if you drank them. Once you finished them, you could take them off your hands. And the goal was to be the first one to have use of your hands. If they had a video of me at 17-year-olds in a frat house with that, that image, yeah, it could probably be pretty difficult for me to get a job interview, right? But I haven't had a Mad Dog 2020 since then. Like, just because you did something in a moment of time when you're 17, 18 years old does not mean that's part of who you are as a person.
Oh, those are tough, right? So the empathy I have for the player is, okay.
By the way, the best Mad Dog flavor, obviously, is strawberry banana.
You're so much different at 18 years old versus 22, 23. The empathy I have for the teams are, you're only allotted 7 picks. And on the high end, you're going to pick 11 or 12 times. You might pick less than that. I'm all for eliminators. So even if it's unfair to the player, I always use the phrase, I would rather let someone else take that chance. So if a team's like, that's a little too risky for us, I'm empathetic to the team that just says, we only get so many of these picks. I don't want to use one if I have any sort of question or doubt. So I kind of get it from both sides.
It's also,
as usual,
it's a data point.
Lukewarm take on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a data point that's difficult to counter. So it's a unique.
But it's also a data point that you can't quantify. You can't quantify the data point. So if that's the case, is it truly a data point? If it's something that is unquantifiable and it's just kind of perception, you have no context around it, like the video clip that Rattler the QB1. Like, we have no idea how it was edited. We have no idea the context, or we have no idea the video that wasn't used. We have no idea what he was like off camera. So if you can't quantify the data point, what is the point of even having it?
Unique, like absent sort of theoretical behind the scenes cameras in his locker room in South Carolina, it's hard to know if the positive stuff is actually true. You know what I mean? Like, you're hearing it.
Yeah, it's exactly what I was saying. Like, we don't have video of him in the same situation 5 years later when he's at South Carolina. If we had video of him at South Carolina in the same situation acting completely different, then what? Then all of a sudden, does he have A+ character? Does he get drafted in the second round?
Secondhand, you're not seeing it, whereas seeing it resonates and makes an impact. There's no way of countering that 3 years later, even if it's true, to the same degree. So if you're an NFL team, all you can do is be like, well, let's talk to him. Let's do the stuff that we do to research a guy's character. Let's talk to coaches.
Yeah, bring him in. Teammates. That's the whole point of the visits. That's the whole point of the visits. The whole point of, in case y'all don't know how this works, like, NFL teams, they get allotted a certain amount of prospect visits, like a top 30, top 50, whatever. And they bring them into the facility, work them out, have them around. They take them to dinner. They talk to them. They do whatever they want to do. So I would factor that in way more than I would factor in a video clip from 6 years ago when he's 17, in high school. Like, wouldn't you factor in your actual visit with the person versus some random clip that Netflix chose? I just don't understand why that has been such a negative.
Still different to seeing it on camera actually happen before.
I also, call me skeptical here, there's a report from a reporter that the NFL, right? So when you say the NFL, you're talking NFL. 32 teams.
Right.
Yeah.
Right? Yes. Minus the 6 that just drafted quarterbacks. So you're telling me 20 to 25 teams all came to the same conclusion that the video from high school is the reason we're out on Rattler.
Yep.
Or Johnny Inside Reporter guy spoke to like 1 or 2 teams.
Yeah, Johnny Inside Reporter guy is Ian Rappaport that he's talking about,
who happened to mention the video, and maybe that was their reason, which I think for 1 or 2 teams, like, if that's the reason, that's fine. Yeah. And then projected it out and said NFL teams.
I think that's exactly what happened. I think Rappaport heard that from a handful of teams. He just said, hey, I'm hearing this as a reason why he might slide, which was true. I mean, it's not like Rappaport was, not being honest, but I think it did get out of hand, and I think it is way overblown. And I don't think the video clip or whatever was as important as they're making it out to be.
When the other reality could have been the only team that we thought was really going to be in the need for a quarterback in this draft who didn't take one was the Raiders. They were the only team left, and we just thought, okay, they'll wait, and maybe they just didn't like Rattler, or maybe they were the one team that cared about the video.
So let's start.
So no one else needed to get him.
Let's start with Rattler since we're on there. 5th round steal.
Love it in the 5th round, absolutely.
And not just that, but it's a classic guy of. So it feels like a steal because people thought he would probably go in the 3rd round as that QB7 and the sort of next tier down of quarterbacks once you cleared all the top guys. But the one it's in the next wave of QBs that everybody identified at least has starter tools, right? May never get Physically, he has starter tools. Physically, he has what it takes to be a starter. He is different than quarterbacks we've seen in the past get taken in the 4th and 5th round. He is different than all the other quarterbacks the Saints have taken, just physically. All the other quarterbacks the Saints have taken weren't the consensus favorite to win the Heisman. They weren't the number 1 quarterback prospect coming out of high school. They didn't start at Oklahoma. They didn't beat out eventual Heisman winner, eventual number 1 overall pick Caleb Williams. Like, Spencer Rattler did do all those things. So whether he'll be an NFL starter or not, he still has the tools. He still has the physical tools that allowed him to be those things. Get there, probably won't because quarterbacks drafted that low don't. But he at least has the tools to be a starting NFL quarterback. He's got the arm. He's got the best mechanics of any of these guys. You listen to quarterback coaches, they talk about just the fluidity of his stroke and just how amazing it looks. And, picture perfect every time. He's at least got the ability to do that. And going in the 5th round means there's no like expectations of it.
No pressure.
But
best case
for
scenario.
a guy with no expectations, but actually the tools to do it, he goes to back up Derek Carr, who's a quarterback in that permanently on the hot seat category. So
not really.
There are few places he could have landed that have a clearer pathway to being a starter if you can show you have that ability in the next year or two.
Rattler, I always made this comparison because the Falcons draft was so bad. But Rattler's in such a better situation than Michael Penix. Such a better situation. I mean, Rattler's situation couldn't be any better. And it's perfect for the Saints. It's perfect for Carr. It's just an absolute home run.
Too, right? So from Spencer Rattler's point of view, I think it's a great landing spot as well.
Did they call the Carr family? Not so much Derek, but more so Darren.
Probably not in the fifth round.
Has Darren been alerted that the Saints also drafted another quarterback?
6 p.m. day 3. Heads up, Darren. We might take a guy.
Got to give you a heads up. He's blocked Rattler and he's blocked the Saints on.
Darren is active on Twitter.
By Darren.
I don't know if he's blocked me.
I don't think I am yet. Somehow.
I don't think I'm blocked. I'm a Carr
round
supporter.
1.
Show a couple Derek Carr turnover-worthy plays. See what happens.
Oh, he'll block.
I think I've deliberately stayed away from antagonizing him directly to avoid getting blocked. Taliese Fuaga.
Okay,
round.
talk about the
A+.
players. Talk about the players, Sam.
Talk about the players. I mean, this one makes sense, right? Middle of the first
A+.
round, they had a pretty bad need at right tackle
Yeah.
if Ryan Ramczyk is on the way out, which it sounds like he might be.
Scheme fit, I mean, like Fuaga, scheme fit is perfect. It does exactly what we wanted to do. Look right there. I talked about it at length. The zone blocking grade, 91.3. The fact that he is good at that, and Clint Kubiak is going to want to do that wide zone run, perfect, okay? Run blocking grade, 90.9. Pass blocking grade, 80.8. So, fantastic. Outside zone snaps, I mean, perfect fit, perfect need. Is it high value? No, but fills everything else. So, this is exactly what you want to see a team do with their first pick.
Even if he isn't, they have a need at tackle.
Yeah, I like Fuaga. I think he was one of the top tackles in the draft. They get him at that point. He can, much like Latham, crush people in the run game, and I think he's a solid pass protector. I like Fuaga quite a bit.
Yep, same.
And I think Kool-Aid McKinstry, I know you didn't love him as a first rounder, but we talk about in the second round.
Yeah.
Getting him here. I don't think he does anything exceptionally well. He's
the same. So Kool-Aid's the same thing as Rattler, where if Kool-Aid would have went 22nd overall, nobody would have blinked. No one would have said a word. He was 26th on the PFF board. Up until the day before the draft, he was basically the number one cornerback supposed to go off the board. And then he ends up falling a little bit. So it's another one of those guys where he goes at 41, steal. If he goes at 21, no one says a word. 25, no one says a word. All the cornerbacks were kind of interchangeable. So just a great player, great pedigree. One of Saban's last, big time guys on defense. So he can be coached. He's ready for kind of that NFL tutelage. Coverage grade 87.8, man coverage 74.7, zone 83.8. Love it. I mean, really, really good. I think he could be second best cornerback on the team immediately.
Solid, cogent player.
McKinstry, yeah. So there's a few players like this in this draft where everyone else thinks they're steals. I just think they were good value. Like, I think this is where McKinstry should have gone towards the top of the second round based off his tape, and it's where he went, right? So it's not like I like the pick. I think it's the right pick. It's a good pick at an area that makes sense, and it's good value for where he is. I just don't think it's like, they got him. It's a 20-point steal based off his average draft position. I think this is where he belonged, but I think it still makes it a good pick. So Fuaga in the first round, McKinstry in the second, Spencer Rattler then as their next pick, Bub Means in the fifth round. I like Bub Means and Christian Boyd in particular. Fifth round and sixth round, on top of what they've already drafted, I think are great picks. Bub Means, I think, is like 6'1", 212 pounds, right? Physical prototype.
Yep.
Physical prototype.
Good move.
I think his contested catch rate is like 50%. He's pretty good at that. In a vacuum, he attacks the ball well, like hands catches it, hands out in front, plucks it out of the air. He had a ridiculously one-dimensional role in college. So average depth of target, 17-plus yards downfield. Yeah. I think he can be a lot better player with some more variety in what they're asking him to do. And unlike Brian Thomas Jr., who was doing a lot of that, but had an elite quarterback throwing him the ball, Bub Means did not. His quarterback stank last year, and therefore his chances of doing a lot were limited.
I always talk about Puka Nacua, how he was drafted in the fifth round and what he ended up being. Like, you get a guy like Bub Means, and I'm not saying Bub Means is going to be Puka Nacua, but the difference between Bub Means and Malachi Corley, not high, I don't think. So when all these mock drafts were saying take Malachi Corley at 45, this is what you should do. You should try and find the guy later in the draft where you're like, well, actually, this guy could probably be just as good, if not better. If he's coming from Pitt, where We know what Narduzzi ball can do to players, but he's coming from a situation where he wasn't really in the best spot, with a little bit of NFL tutelage, with a little bit of Clint Kubiak magic. You never know. I mean, he can emerge. So I love the Bub Means pick just for what it is philosophically, like just for what it is. Even if you take away the player, just the idea of like, we're not going to reach on, whatever the number one receiver was at Illinois State in the second round. We're going to wait and see if we can land a guy who we think has a lot of promise and we think can do some things. And I'm not going to lie to you. I'm without even seeing the Saints play, I'm willing to let Clint Kubiak have the benefit of the doubt that he knows what he's looking for. He knows what he wants. And I would think he was the guy who was the driving force behind, hey, let's go with Bub Means. I think I can utilize him. I think I can find a spot for him. So I'm willing to let Kubiak have a little grace here and say, okay, you want to take this guy? You have a guy who is relatively raw, who has these tools. Let's see how you can use him. And if he turns out a good rookie season and we see Bub Means getting utilized, then we know Clint Kubiak saw something.
Another guy with elite PFF gas. So pretty good athleticism.
Means
anyway.
was on the freaks list too, I believe.
Right,
Yeah.
but
Means was a hugely highly touted athlete. I think I saw on one of the athlete boards he was in like the 98th. He was like out of 100. He was like 98. So, every athleticism grade he's been very high.
Elite PFF gas. I think he's got good releases. Route running could do with some nuance, but like I earmarked him as a really nice sleeper early in this draft process. And then Christian Boyd.
I misspoke earlier, by the way. Boyd, just a defensive tackle. I was confusing him with someone else. Apologies.
Misinformation.
Defensive tackle.
Yeah, defensive tackle, but a good one. Northern Iowa, so obviously the level of competition was a little bit iffy.
Yeah, I think Boyd will take a little bit. I think Boyd's the kind of guy where he may play a little bit this year. He may get involved, but he's more of that developmental player, which is fine in the 6th round. It's fine to take a developmental player in the 6th round. It's not fine to take a developmental player in the 1st round or the 2nd round, which is what the Saints have been doing.
He was one of a number of players this year. So where I struggled a bit this season or this draft process was, you heard a lot about the guys that have gone back to school. It's going to be a bad class, but also because of COVID and all these things, there's a ton of these guys that have been in college forever, and you're coming out and they're sort of a day 3 prospect, and immediately in your brain you're like, day 3 prospect. He's 24. He's been in college since the Clinton administration. He's probably not good, But actually, this is just the reality of the world. Like you're going to get more of these guys, right? And we need to kind of adjust what the normal benchmarks are for that kind of thing. So he'd been in college for 6 years and had played in 5 of them, right? Redshirted 1 year, already 24. But like he's pretty good. He's strong. He's at his best when he sort of torques and just ragdolls guys and gets rid of the block. But I think he could be a good NFL player once he's coached up a little bit. I think that level of competition was rough, but I think
obviously at Northern Iowa, you're not going to get the level of competition, but again, he just has to kind of come in, take a little bit, get used to what's going on, and then hopefully Dennis Allen, a brilliant defensive mind, can figure out what to do with him.
Got some ability in the 6th round?
Yeah.
38 bench reps for Boyd.
Strong.
I mean, it's never wrong to be strong. 38 bench reps is that's a heavy. That's probably 20 grams of creatine a day right there, ladies and gentlemen.
The question is the 12th percentile broad, 13th percentile 20-yard shuttle, 10th percentile 3-cone. So movement skills not as good as just his pure strength at this point at 6'3", 325. As I mentioned earlier, there's not a whole bunch of those body types in this draft, so not bad getting him in the 6th.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, I think, look, PFF said it best. I mean, this is they gave us an A+ draft. The young man on the left said this should be seen as a top 5 draft. I agree 100%. I mean, everything is saying the same thing. I think we nailed it. I really do. I think the Saints nailed the draft. I'm very happy with what we've seen. We've done a ton of draft coverage here, and so it's nice to see kind of the thought process behind some of these metrics we're talking about. Ladies and gentlemen, get on down in the comments below. Let me know what you think, and I will see you in the next video.